Hello everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present work we made and we published in several years ago. So 220 with so based on our technology, so the static multiple light scattering, to detect simultaneously, in fact, and screen the stability and also the dosimetry of nanoparticle dispersions for further toxicological studies. So unfortunately, it's not based on graphene particles, I would say more on titanium dioxide, but however, all the methodology and the protocol used is also compatible with the study of graphene oxide and also conventional graphene. So first of all, I will just make a quick overview of the subject. I will make a quick introduction on the interest in predicting this stability for formulation with some practical examples before moving to the static multiple light scattering analysis benefits for in vitro toxicological setup, with the explanation around the procedure, the importance also to evaluate the nanoparticle agglomeration state, and also the presentation of the technology. After that, I will expose you the result we had on the screening of the nanoparticle stability and also the dosimetry with these techniques. And finally, I will present you also some future perspective that can be applied to this subject. So first of all, what is the main challenges for developing and producing, I would say, stable formulation? It can be in all application fields. So first of all, you need to select the right raw material, determine the right formulation before, in fact, to set the process and scale up in a view to have an easy way to produce and to ensure the quality control. So in fact, the main goals are to shorten the time to market, optimize the cost, and provide always high quality product, and that require fast and accurate characterizations, such as particle or droplet size, rheological properties, but also physical stability. So some example, we made some work in collaboration, for example, with Pfizer on conventional vaccines, in which we predict the redispersion state of these vaccines based on the sedimentation behavior of the samples. We made approximately the same in the case of pressurized inhalers, also for pharmaceutical purposes and treatment of lung disease. And especially we predict, in fact, the stability and the redispersions of these particles in their pressurized samples. And also a quick example on the cosmetics, in which we predict also, we help to predict the stability of cosmetics regarding different parameters, such as the process with the homogenizing time and the homogenizing speed, and also around also the additive and the components you have inside, such as the oil content or the surfactant type and concentrations. So now more on the procedure for in vitro toxicological nanoparticle dispersions. So in fact, we begin with titanium dioxide nanoparticulate dispersed in water, in which we have added some BSA to ensure after ultrasonification that the titanium dioxide nanoparticles are well dispersed. And after that, we collect these samples and put it into a culture cell medium, such as DMEM, supplemented with some BSA, and in order to have also the particle much well dispersed in this sample just before, in fact, collecting the samples and tested in the biological medium to see the toxicological effects. So what we made in fact the static multiple light scattering analysis before putting this particle into the cell culture medium, and after, to see the agglomeration state of particle and if these particles are really well dispersed, in a view to have to define an optimum protocol conditions, in fact, to use this particle afterwards in toxicological analysis. So in fact, on the importance of the agglomeration states, if you have your initial dispersions, you put some mixing energy, you have the ability, in fact, to well disperse your particle or not. Such particle can remain, in fact, agglomerated. And here is more the case, I would say, a notion of dispersibility. So how to put in energy to mix the particles, to have the particle well dispersed or not. And there are a second also aspect is the fact that the particle can remain stable during time or re-agglomerate after stopping the mixing energy. And here it's more question of colloidal stability. The fact is, with the agglomeration, we can have a rapid also sedimentations of the particle in the sample, and that gives some problem. First of all this behavior, I would say, is specific to the considered dispersions. If you change the particle, if you change the dispersion medium, it can change completely this behavior. You have, so with agglomerations, a decrease of the specific surface that will impact afterwards, in fact, the toxicological analysis you want to do. It also induces variation of size and also variation of concentrations. If you, I would say, collect your sample and in fact you have less particle than it should be, it will also impact your toxicological analysis afterwards. So in fact, the doses, there is a huge impact of the agglomeration state on the dosimetry of nanoparticle, which can give a non-representative test, as I said, for the further toxicological analysis. So on the technology, so the technology is quite simple. In fact, you have a light source and two detectors, one in transmission for dilute media and one in back scattering. All the light source and the detector are placed on a specific head that allow a vertical scan of the sample periodically. And in fact, you have the opportunity during the analysis to register in function of the sample height, the variations of the back scattering or the transmissions in your sample that give you an analysis of the destabilization phenomena you have in your sample, such as clarification, agglomerations, and sedimentations. And in fact, this technology is at the base of all the instruments we sell in formulation in our society. So, for example, to give you quick example on that, if you have an initial particular state of your formulation at the beginning, you have no variation in your sample. In the ideal case, I would say you will have no variations macroscopically and no variations, I would say, on the transmission and back scattering signal. If you have in the I would say most common case concentration variations such as sedimentations for particles, dispersions, you will have in fact local variations on your sample, and you will be able to quantify these sedimentations and migration phenomena. And if you have size variations such as agglomerations, you will have a global variations of the transmission and the back scattering, as in fact this value of transmission and back scattering are directly linked to notion of size of particles and concentration in the dispersed media. So in fact, at initial time, you will have a sample which are quite well dispersed, I would say, and so an homogeneity of the concentration around the sample. So by applying directly the mean theory, you can convert the transmission or the back scattering signal you have into a mean diameter of particles, initial mean diameter of particles, so determined by static multiple light scattering. Also, you can do it afterwards in dynamic. So in fact, you let the sample destabilize, and you will have at the end, in fact, a measurement of the settling velocity of particle that can be linked also to a mean particle size, more based on the Stokes law and Stokes equations. And the fact is, if you have a difference between these two diameter, you will have an agglomeration in your samples. So what we do is here, for example, we can, for the first scan, determine in the middle of the sample. Here we have a mean back scattering value at initial time, which give you an initial mean particle size. And from the destabilization of the sample, here is back scattering, so it's a concentrated samples. And if you have, for example, destabilization, here a particle settling, you will have an increase of transmissions at the top of the sample. And from that, we can define, in fact, a defined transmission threshold. If you are more closer to the bottom, you will be more focused on bigger particles. On the top, more focused on lower particle size. And in function of the threshold you put here, you will be able to register the increase of the peak window in function of time, and the slope gives you the settling velocity of your particles. And if you know some parameters such as densities and viscosities of the solvents and the difference of density between particle and the solvent, you are able, in fact, to determine a diameter, a mean diameter, which is more related to agglomerations. So what we do is that we apply all this technology to our procedure to prepare, I would say, the most representative dispersions of particles, here titanium dioxide. So we measure, in fact, with different concentration of BSA in water, the mean particle size at initial time. And what we see is that we see clearly that if we go up to 0.2, you will have no clear change of the initial particle size. And if we go more than 0.2 weight% of BSA in your sample, you will have, in fact, an increase of the particle size from, I would say, 150 nanometer to approximately 1 micron. So quite important. And if we, for example, calculate right now the mean agglomerated size, so during the destabilization of the product, you will see that you go from approximately 200 nanometer, and you putting 0.2 weight% of BSA, you will increase to 3 microns and 5 microns even for 0.5 weight% BSA. So here it's clearly a depletion effect. And in this case, we need not to add so much BSA. In fact, we don't need to add so much BSA in a view to keep the size lower as possible for our particles. And now on the step, we put it into the cell sculpture medium. We see clearly that we are in the reverse case. Here, we have quite important ionic strengths in such samples. And here, in fact, adding more BSA help to keeping, I would say, lower particle size, which are more representative to the best dispersions and best dispersions of titanium dioxide particles. So in fact, what is really interesting in this case is that we see clearly that we don't need to add a lot of concentration at the beginning of BSA, but we need to increase these concentrations for the DMM to really keep the particle size as lower as possible for further toxicological analysis. So what we see also here is we are able, in fact, to have the mean, initial size. But what is important is the agglomerated size we have, in fact, in these transmissions and backscattering profiles. And from this size, in fact, we can, with the meteorite, recalculate, in fact, the concentration we can have in function of the sample height and in function of time. And we can have such a graphic, which is really interesting for me, especially for the dosimetry of particle, to see, in fact, how the concentration will evolve in the sample in the function of time. And that it's quite useful, in fact, to estimate if I will have the same concentrations when I have created the product and when I collect the sample for further analysis. So here is the example of the dispersion of titanium dioxide with BSA in water according to the increase of the concentration of BSA. And we see clearly that with increased concentration of BSA, we have a drop a fall, in fact, of the concentrations in the calculated zone of the tube. We also try to link this, I would say, dosimetry profile of particle with a model, so classical model for sedimentations, and also a model made by the team of Adelaide, which should be closer to experimental results we can have. So now it's I would say it's more for further perspective. We launch a new instruments that are not only dedicated to the measure of the stability and the dosimetry of particles, but also on the dispersibility. So the way to mix particles, so the first stage, in fact, to mix particles to have the sample as well dispersed as it is at the beginning. And that is really interesting, because if you can register with such devices the evolution of transmission of mass scattering in function of the mixing time, and convert it directly to a variation of mean size in function of the time. So I think it's quite interesting for creating the samples at the beginning and controlling that it will the sample is well dispersed. And you can always do the analysis, so the stability analysis afterwards also. A new thing which could be really interesting for also developing this aspect of controlling and make sure that the protocol and the particle, the sample is well dispersed before toxicological analysis is in fact the optimization we have to do, and we will propose at the beginning of next year. Regarding the calculation of the particle size distribution of particle in concentrated samples. So, as I already mentioned, that it is possible to measure the particle velocity, so mean particle velocity, which give you at the end a mean agglomerated particle size. Now the calculation will be able, in fact, to screen all the, I would say, the evolution transmission signal to give you a real particle size distributions for agglomerates, and also which is not limited to the concentrations. We do first some tests here on so different titanium dioxide suspensions, in which we have supplemented it with some concentrations of sodium chloride to induce the agglomerations, and what we see is that we are clearly able to measure in a very accurate way these particle size distributions of the agglomerates, even for dilute suspension and more concentrated ones, such as the graph at the bottom of the slide with 1% volumic titanium dioxide in the suspensions, which here we clearly close to the limits we can have, for example, for over light scattering techniques such as laser diffraction and DLS. So I think it's quite an asset, this technique, to ensure that the sample is really well dispersed and in the best conditions to make afterwards toxicological studies in a good way. So yeah, I have finished. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any question, please ask. I will try to do my best to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume. I think this is an extremely important work for those doing in vitro exposure and those trying to calculate those things. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but I guess we can reach out for you through the message or by email, or maybe at the end of this session if there is time for questions. Thank you
for the opportunity. So as I was mentioning, my presentation, we have a short introduction where I would like to briefly mention the conclusion of a report that was made in 2022 from the European Union Observatory for Nanomaterials on graphene related to the materials. shortly talk about the objective of the macrame project in terms of the physical chemical characterization of graphene related material. And then after Lausanne presentation, we will go through an active session of a Mentimeter survey. So as I think you may all know that the European Union Observatory for Nanomaterials, the UEON, published together with ECHA a very comprehensive report that in 2022 that is constructed as a really systematic and structured review of the literatures that is focusing on what are the potential adverse effects of graphene related materials, so for different types of graphenes, including graphene, graphene oxide and others, on both on human health and on the environment. It's if you don't know this document, I really suggest to go through it, because it's really reviewing all the publications that have been published in the last 20 years on the subject. With regards to that, as I said, it is focusing on multiple kinds of materials. So there are sections on graphene, few layer graphene, graphene nanosheets, graphene nanoflake, graphene oxide, reduced graphene oxide, and graphene nanoribbons, for example. And they have made a literature search concluding the main research engines, but also considering documents from the graphene flagship and websites of national regulatory authorities. And with regards to that, there are in the first part of the document 9 main conclusions, some that are related toward the physical chemical characterization that is needed for graphenes, and others that are more focused on priorities and gaps with regards to in vitro and ecotoxicological studies. So since today we are mainly focusing on the graphene and on the physical chemical characterization, I just wanted to mention that one of the main points in terms of needs that is stressed in this report is that, as we have discussed this morning, we really need to have a very thorough characterization of each type of graphene in terms of the chemical composition, the structure, the lateral side, the number of layers, different physical chemical properties that have to be linked to the in vitro studies, and this is very important. And of course, all the evidences that are seen in terms of toxicological effects are linked on those properties, despite we do not still have a full comprehensive understanding on the structural relationships between those properties and the effects that we do see. And so for this reason, it's really important that in the near future, all the standards that have been developed and all the methods that are available are really used and associated with the results that are coming from the toxicological and ecotoxicological study. And the other thing that is also mentioned is that one thing that we really need to work on is to develop methods, in particular analytical or spectroscopic methods, that would allow to detect and quantify not only the graphene and the other carbon-related materials when they are in the biological and environmental matrices. And because, of course, we need to understand what are the changes and the biotransformation they are going through. And of course, another key point is really that we have to find ways to define and quantify the dose that is because of course the dose and exposure scenario are really key for understanding the outcomes of those studies. So I think that I'm not saying anything new, but this is something that is really important to stress. And so one thing you have already heard about the macrame project, Tommaso yesterday, and also Elizabeth today have presented the concept, so I will not go through the general description of the project, but one thing that I wanted to mention before getting into the Mentimeter survey is that in this project we are really trying not only to focus on in terms of physical chemical characterization, and in terms of materials, we are not only focusing on, let's say, the pristine under brackets. I don't know what is the right term to call them, but of course, what I mean by pristine graphene-related materials are of course, the graphene oxide, whatever powder or suspension that is used in the and included as an additive in the commercial product. But we are really focusing on the industrial cased and industrial based materials. In particular, we are working on, for example, graphene oxide that is included in hollow fibers that are used as filters in drinking waters, or few layer graphenes that are used in the cover, the layer that is covering the battery management systems, or for example, graphene related materials that are included in sprays from consumer products. And our aim is to develop and harmonize methodological approaches that are not only help to fully characterize the pristine graphene materials, but also to get an understanding on identify and try to semi-quantify those materials when they are included in the composites. And with regards to that, in terms of the development of methods for the physical chemical characterization and for the identification of the graphene in those related products, we are focusing mostly on sample preparation strategies. And here I'm linking to for example, the dispersion protocols. We have seen some methodologies that Guillaume was presented in the previous talk. So, I mean, what could be the techniques that would allow to measure the dispersion, the stability, the physical and the chemical stability and the dose in biological matrices, and how to compare approaches, for example, to produce aerosol in a controlled way, combining or comparing orthogonal approaches such as the dispersion in a liquid media that is aerosolized versus produce an aerosol directly from the powder. And the other thing we are working on is on spectroscopic and also mass spec based method for the semi-quantification of those material in complex matrices. So I hope that we will have results to show, for example, in the next meeting that we will organize possibly next year. Then the rest of the presentation, it will be more a Mentimeter survey asking to all the participants of this meeting what are their needs in terms of standardization. So I may leave the floor to Dusan again, and then come back to the Mentimeter surveys, okay, for you, and if you have his presentation.
Thank you, Fanny. Sean, do you have the presentation of Dusan?
I don't. Dusan, do you want me to try and talk you through how to share your screen?
Evening to all. Thanks to organizer for inviting me and to share research for my team on testing of graphene related to the materials. In my talk, I will highlight the potential of complementary analytical methods for quality control of bulk property of graphene powders, with special focus on thermogravimetric methods, where I will show several examples how to detect fake graphene and analyze different types of graphene powders, not possibly by other existing methods. I hope you will find this result helpful for this meeting and your standard harmonization activities. Here's very a brief snapshot of graphene RRD. My team, supported by ARC Graphene Research Hub, is doing in the last several years. The aim of this national research program is to support translation of graphene research from academia to industry. Scalable graphene manufacturing was our first task and most challenging problem for graphene industry 7 years ago, that we successfully solved by our industry partner, First Graphene. After 2 years of lab development, the company built manufacturing plant of 100 tons capacity to produce high quality, pristine graphene using green electrochemical process. First Graphene is now one of world leading suppliers of graphene powders, and my team is very proud to making this contribution. In last 7 years, we worked with all different type of graphene materials. We generate 9 patents, 6 are in licensing, and about 20 new products. So we very well understand these materials. This also include broad range value-add graphene materials such as inks, additives, master batches, filament, and so on. We use to develop specific product for our industry partners, such as paint for protective coating, adsorbents, fertilizers, sensors, electrodes, and so on, which are used for broad range of different application, and some products are on market and some are on last stage of development. So now let's to show why standardization and characterization of graphene related to the materials is challenging and so complex problem. Firstly, we have too many type of graphene materials, such as pristine graphene, graphene oxide, reduced graphene, functionalized graphene, doped graphene, thermostatic graphene, and so on. And all of them have remarkably different properties. Secondly, we have about 20 different graphene manufacturing methods from about 500 producers. Most popular route to make graphene are from graphite. We have several processes here, but also graphene can be made from biomass or carbon gases or by chemical synthesis from organic molecules. And again, property of these graphene materials are not the same. So industry produced graphene on the market now are coming in bulk forms as powder, paste, and dispersion, usually in kilogram scale. And most of them, they have limited information about their quality and properties. When end user wants to buy graphene or develop their products, they usually confuse to select most appropriate graphene materials to know their property and how to test them. To make these things even worse, recent published papers showed that majority of graphene, industry-produced graphene materials are not graphene at all. This is really alarming news, shaking confidence to $1 billion of graphene industry, indicating that graphene standardization is still a challenging issue that needs to be urgently addressed. Key challenges from graphene producer perspective are that recommended testing methods such as TM, IFM, SCM, Raman instrument are too expensive to them and they cannot afford. They usually pay for this testing, and the result from these methods based on spot analysis probing only single or few particles could provide misleading result as they don't represent average property of powders at kilogram scale what end users buy. This is one of the problems why graphene producers are still lacking to establish proper quality system, and the quality of produced graphene is not consistent. From graphene users and product developers perspective, situation is even more worse because they're struggling to select the most appropriate graphene material on the market and critical property what they need for their application. Because of all these problems, it is very critical to have continuous development of quality standard, testing method, their harmonization. So it's very important to involve VAMAS, Graphene Council, or similar program to help both of these industry side and bridge this these gaps. So my team is engaged on this topic in two areas. One, we are providing characterization service to industry partners, and we're also working on development of new low-cost complementary methods for testing graphene materials. In terms of testing, what we're doing, we have different requests from industry clients. A graphene producer wants us to know what are the properties of their graphene. They also want to have a result for their technical data sheets or their certification. Graphene users, on the hand, they want to know what black powder, what they're purchasing, is it real graphene or what is their property? To address this whole request, we established in our lab a very comprehensive testing program based on ICO standard and own developed methods, able to provide localized and information about localized and bulk property of graphene materials. In total, we developed 20 different methods and measured 30 parameters which are all listed here. Our work on developing complementary methods is specifically focused on bulk graphene powders. As part of this development, we built own library of graphene materials, collecting samples from producers worldwide, and we have a very large database on property of these materials. We also started to use machine learning to get more information from tested samples and establishing link between property and potential application of graphene materials. We also developed a program to classify quality of graphene materials based on all our activity, what we doing. Here is more details about our complementary methods we are developing in our lab. This method can provide a chemical and structural or physical property of graphene powders, and they can be very nicely adapted to industry setting for their quality control needs. For example, if you're starting with a tapped bulk density, it can indicate stacking level of graphene sheets or even provide some indication about surface area of your powders. Light microscopy can indicate number of layers of your graphene material. Dispersion stability is very important for many applications for making inks and paint. Contact angle can tell you is your material hydrophobic and hydrophilic. Acid titration, very simple method, can provide you quantitative concentration of functional group of your graphene powders. Particle size measurement and zeta potential can provide you size distribution of your powders and also their charge. FTM measurement can provide information on functional groups. UVV spectroscopy can provide information about concentration, oxidation, degree, and also about surface area of your graphene powders. Portable Raman can provide information of defects of your graphene sheets and also number of layers. And finally, full probe measurement can provide you electrical of resistivity of your graphene material. Now I'm going to show TGA method that we're using for testing of graphene powders. The concept is very simple, based on heating of your material in furnace and measuring mass loss after its thermal decomposition. The mass changes are represented as TGA graph or a first derivative DTG graph with peaks and T max value. These graphs can reveal many useful analytical information showing property, materials, chemical composition, and so on. After testing 100 of different type of graphene materials, including graphene oxide, reduced graphene oxide, pristine or few layer graphene or graphite, we found that all they have different and specific TGA signature indicating that TGA method can be used as useful tool for their analysis that is not considered before. We found that this TGA graph and their key parameters as number of these peaks that presenting a number of mass changes, Tmax value, they can be used for both qualitative and quantitative analysis of chemical composition, broad range of graphene materials. This slide shows example how TGA can be used for detection of fake graphene powders mixed with carbon, such as graphite or graphene or oxide. More details about this work you can see in our published paper. In this experiment, we spike pristine graphene powder, few layer graphene, with different concentration of graphite or graphene oxide, with concentration 1 to 70%. So you can see here how TGA very nicely show when this additional peak by addition of this graphite on GO starting from 1%. By this method, it is possible to only detect this impurity, but also it is possible to measure their mass concentration with 1% level. So testing this sample with TM, SCM, IFM, Raman, we could easily miss to detect this additives what we are. So showing very great potential of this simple method to detect fake graphene. So in next experiment, we also tested broad range of other potential additives that can be added in graphene materials. That include graphite, carbon black, activate carbon, carbon nanotube, and biochar. Their comparative analysis by Raman, XRD, and TGA show very nicely advantages of TGA method. Because you can see no much difference between these materials you can see in the Raman and XRD, but TGA show very nicely distinctly peak for all this carbon material except in graphene and carbon blacks where they overlap. So in the next experiment, we add 10% of all this additive into graphene oxide and RGO and a few layer graphene to show can we detect by Raman and XRD. And again, we were not able to detect this addition. But by TGA, you can see in almost all sample, we can see this addition very nicely. And even more, we could quantitatively measure them quite precisely by measuring of surface area of this extra peak. In most recent work, we also showed how TGA method can be used for analysis of functionalized graphene material, which are a very important type of graphene for many applications. We tested samples modified with oxygen, sulfur, and amino group, and all this showing different peaks. And we also show again that we can not only qualitatively detect, we also show that we can measure their concentration that is shown in this table and compare with XPS and IDEX. Again, showing very great potential of this very simple method. Based on all our TGA work, we optimize protocol and perform ALC validation and the VAMAS program led by myself, Andrew Pollard, and Wang Lin Li from China. This study involved 12 labs around the world and nicely balanced from 6 metrology organizations, 3 university, and 3 from company making a TGA instrument. More details you can see in published papers. So what for this study, we provide 3 samples for all participants, including GO, RGO, and fuel graphene, which as unknown samples. We provide them a protocol and provide them data processing protocol and a reporting protocol, and we ask them to test selected parameters in triplicate, and they provide to us raw data and process data that we again tested. So we have 2 sets of data. In this study, we select 5 different parameters that including physical and analytical, that is shown here. And specifically, we want to know reproducibility of selected parameters, variation between different labs, impact of different instruments, influence of operators, and influence of stability of commercial graphene samples. So I'm not showing all the results. Here is just summary showing statistical conformity analysis by Mandel key and H parameters. Results showing 19% of conformity for all parameters, which are very good result for us. And we consider this very good result specifically because for this testing, we didn't use reference graphene materials. We didn't use standardized method, and operators who did this measurement, they never before that analysis of graphene. So what we learned here very briefly, most errors, most source of variation, what we observe are coming from operators who did follow procedure, their subjectivity. But we found a problem with sample stability, especially for graphene oxide, and influence of lab, temperature, humidity, and so on. But very important that we didn't see any impact of using different TG instruments, which is really great news, because study was done with 5 different instruments, totally different design. So we included all these changes and optimize our protocol, and this protocol are now included in new ICO standard and currently in consultation stage, handled by Charles Clifford. This is a very nice story, starting when we start explore this method. We tested to do many different graphene materials, developed a protocol, validate the protocol, and write draft, which is now into standard. So here I coming to conclusion. I highlight the importance of complementary analytical methods for testing graphene material, which are industry affordable and could significantly improve existing quality control system of graphene material. I showed also several examples of successfully demonstrated TGI method to detect fake graphene material, different carbon impurity, and also successful validation through the VAMAS program and translation into ICO standard. A very nice story indeed. Finally, my message is advancing of ICO standard. Their harmonization and implementation are critical for emerging graphene industry, and there is needs for urgent action for all players, including ICO committee, VAMAS, metrology organization, graphene council, and industry. And meeting as this, I believe that is very helpful to get these actions done. And finally, I would like to thank Australian Research Council and Graphene Research Hub to supporting research, and my team for their very hard work. Especially thanks for Dr. Pei Layap from my team, who done most of this work, and I expect she will be a future expert in this field. I would like to thank Andrew Pollard from NPL helping me to initiate this VAMAS project and giving to my team more metrology aspect we didn't know much as we're working at university. And finally, I would like to thank audience for listening. And if you need any more information, please contact me on my email. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dusan. Very interesting and quite important message you have delivered now. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but of course, during the roundtable, you will be there, so there will be a chance to ask anything. So, Fanny, if you would like to go with the second part of your presentation, please.
Yes, I will. So I am sharing the screen. Then I will restart presenting. Can you hear me well? And can you see the presentation in presentation mode?
Yes, go ahead.
So as I was saying before, now the last part of my presentation is an interactive Mentimeter session. So the first thing, instructions. So if please connect to the Mentimeter site, you can do so by either making a photo on the QR code or going on menti.com and then entering the code 84342337. George also shared a direct link to the Mentimeter, which should bring you directly to the right link to answer the questions. So I will just give 30 seconds to everyone to connect, please. If you click and put a like to the slide, we will know that you are connected. So I see 12, the number is rising. Fantastic. So let's see. We are many people in the room, so I will just give you 30 seconds more to connect. And then we can go with the first question. You will have the link to connect on the chat, and there is on all the slides also the code to be typed to answer the question. So let's go. Let's start. So there is the first one is a very simple question. So what you are working for? What kind of institution? So it's just to be sure that everyone is well connected, everything is working. So universities, but also industry, SMEs, regulatory agencies, CROs, metrology institutes. Let's see. So what do we have? Please don't be shy. Voilà. So I think, first of all, that is working. So that is very nice. And voila. 38 answers, which is nice, great. So 39. So let's go with the second question. So we're going a bit more in the topic. So here we thought of asking questions on three main topics. Let's say the first is we would like to consider. We have heard in the very nice presentation that we had in the session of those meetings that there are a lot of ongoing activities for the standardization of methods for measuring the key properties of graphene-related materials. So the first question here is do we still have a need to continue working and to continue working on developing protocol and standards for the characterization of those materials? And when I'm talking about the pristine materials, I am talking about the raw graphene, graphene oxide, few layer graphene, powders and additives. So I see that is a yes. Well, I mean, considering all the presentation that we had, I mean, it's clear that it is key and very important. But of course, I mean, that was the first question. So luckily you answered yes. Otherwise, we would have interrupted the Mentimeter survey immediately. So let's then go more into details on what. So here you will have on your phone or on your computer a long list of different properties and attributes. And then the question is, what do you think are the priorities for developing new standards and protocols? So what we are missing for each of those attributes, you have a scale from 0 to 10, and you can decide what score is associated to how important is, how high is the priority, being 10, of course, the highest. And then you have so structural defect and crystallinities, the number of layers or the particle shape, the lateral dimension, particle aspect ratio, bulk density, the elemental composition, the oxygen content, impurities, the functionalization of the surface, the particle surface charge, or the specific surface area. I know this is a long one to answer, so I will give you 1 minute to do so. It's a long list of attributes. And the question is really, please consider the attributes for which you feel there are no standards yet, eventually no projects ongoing, or that you feel that are really the most critical. And then thanks, I see that 28, 29 answers, so I mean, fantastic. 31. So it seems, I mean, it seems that they are all in a way important. Higher score for now. Well, I don't want to influence you, but please continue to vote. I will give you still 30 seconds to go. So it seems that the functionalization and the impurities are considered very important. Again, also the number of layers, the elemental composition on the surface area. Okay, thanks. So we will go to the next one then. Now, first, before we were thinking about developing standards in terms of methods and protocols, here the question is, do we also need reference materials? To my knowledge, at the moment, there are no graphene related to the reference materials. There is a material that is available in the JRC repository, and of course, there is some work that is ongoing, and there are some repository also from the graphene flagship, but we don't have reference materials, meaning materials that are homogeneous and stable and that could be used for the validation of methods with one or multiple properties that have been certified by metrology institutes, interlaboratory studies, etc. Oh, there is a large part of I don't know. That is interesting. We can discuss that also in the roundtable. But voilà. Okay. So thanks. So the majority says yes. I will then go to the next one. Okay. Here there is a different way of answering. So you have 100 points in total that you have to divide between the different options. So here you have 5 options. So if you think that they are equally important, it will be 20 points of each of them. If there is one that is very important for you and the others are not, then you will give to that one 100 points. So the point is, with regards to the reference materials, if we want to select a type of graphene to start the development of reference materials between few layer graphene, multi-layer graphene, graphene oxide, reduced graphene oxide of graphene quantum dot, which one would be more important for you? Again, you have 100 points, so you can divide this 100 points among the 5 options. What would be the one or the ones that you consider the highest priorities? And here there is quite well, between graphene oxide and few layer graphene, it's really they are both on the top list. So I will give you some time. This is a bit more complex to answer, let's say. And thank you to everyone for playing this game, by the way. I mean, and thanks for participating and for actively answering. So I'll give you 30 more seconds to answer what materials to prioritize for the development of reference materials eventually, between graphene oxide, few layer graphene, multi-layer graphene, reduced graphene oxide, and graphene quantum dots. Okay, let's go. We will go to the next one then. So here we shift to the second topic. So in the first one was really question with regards to the pristine materials and methods and reference materials. Here we want to touch base on priorities associated with the development of toxicological and ecotoxicological assessments related to the graphene-related materials. So the first question that we have is the following. So we are referring and considering an ISO document, which is the 13014 that was developed in the early 200, so in 2012, if I remember correctly, yes. So, and this document is one of the first that is containing guidance on the physical chemical characterization, so the parameters that are important, the physical chemical parameters and attributes that should be measured, the minimum set of parameters that should be measured to support the toxicological assessment. So And here the question that we have for you is if you think that a similar document should be developed specifically, or if this ISO document should be adapted to consider the specific parameters that would be needed for the toxicological assessment of graphene-related materials. Where the idea would be really to specifically define the minimal set of parameters that are necessary to measure, physical chemical parameters that are necessary to measure for and associate to the outcome of the toxicological assays. That is an easy one, yes or no, or maybe, I don't know. So let's see, here also the majority answers yes. I will give you 30 seconds more. Okay, and then to get a bit more in details, if you have answered yes, but even also if you have answered no, even if you want to play the game, so what do you think that are the priorities? I mean, here, what are the priorities when we think of developing a robust toxicological or ecotoxicological assessment? And so what shall we do for as the first actions? Again, this is a question where you have 4 answers. You have 100 points, so you can divide the points considering what is the most critical action. So the first one is the one that we were mentioning in the previous question. So the defining the minimum set of physical chemical parameters of the pristine materials to be measured. Okay, here in the biological media, of course, okay, also consider and associated to the assessment. Then another point would be to develop spectrometry or microscopy methods or other methodologies eventually for the identification of the graphene related to the materials in cells and tissue, which is related to have the right dosimetry. Having fit-for-purpose protocols for cell exposure, and here we are coming back to having dispersion protocols, which allows us to understand what is the aggregation and agglomeration propensity that of those materials when they are put in cell media, I mean, being for cell or ecotoxicological studies, or it is important to harmonize the biological endpoints. In this we mean harmonizing the types of the biological assays and the endpoints that are considered specifically for graphene-related materials. Again, here you have 100 points. If you think that everything is equally important, you can assign 25 to each of those. Otherwise, you can select what are the most important options for you. And I will give you 30 seconds more. We are almost at the end. We have a few questions to go, and then we will start with the round table. So I will then now shift to the next one. So do you think that there are, this is an open question, so you can type what you want. Do you think that there are other critical points or issues that are to be tackled and very important for the development of robust toxicological assessment? Here, if you want, you can type if you think that there are something that we have missed completely. Or if you don't type anything, I will take it as a no. I will give you 1 minute to think about this. Contamination. I guess that also the endotoxin contamination, the sterility, and also maybe, I don't know, what do you mean by contamination? It could be also the, impurities, but definitely very, very important. What are the characteristics determining hazard of the graphene-related material? Air exposure, manufacturing protocol, process, protocols for sample preparation, for toxicological tests, graphene in complex media, sterilization, availability of SOP to all. That I agree to that. That's definitely. Are graphene-related material toxic? That we can discuss in the roundtable for sure. Anyhow, it's the report I was showing at the beginning of my talk. I think it's very interesting with that regards. It's really giving a comprehensive answer to that. So biological application to cells need to meet a real-life scenario. That is another one, that's for sure. Characterization, dispersion. Thanks. So many, a lot of other ideas, or ideas that are only partially associated with the options that we gave before. Okay, so I will give you 30 seconds more. Interference with observance of standards method. That also is very important, I think, and super critical. Voila. Okay, let's go to the. This is the last one, I think. So when we are coming back again to the physical chemical attributes that may be associated with the characterization in biological environment, what do you think that may be the most critical? And here again, you have a scale from 0 to 10, where you can indicate what would be the most critical according to your experience. So here it's the dispersibility and the physical stability, the surface properties, the elemental composition, the bulk density, physical properties, their size, the shape, the aspect ratio, and or the lateral dimension, or the structural properties and the crystallinity. And here again, thanks for bearing with us and for being so active. Yeah, giving you a few more seconds. This is another one that may require a longer answer. Voila. Give you 30 more seconds if you want to answer. Let's go. It seems that the dispersibility, the physical stability, physical properties, surface properties, and also elemental composition are very important. Thanks. Then we go with, okay, that was not the last. This I think is the last. Are there some analytical techniques that you would consider for the detection or for the analysis of the stability of the graphene-related material in biological media? So I'm thinking here is this is an open question. So here it's with regards to the fact that techniques that may be considered, for example, in guidelines generally, like UVVs, may not be suitable in all kind of media. There are some cases with fluorescent techniques where maybe, for example, there are interferences that has to be considered. So there are other options. Voila. Let's see some. Thanks. And then this is really for introducing the discussion in the round table. So we will, Dov George will lead this. So we will shift to the round table in 1 minute. Are there some questions that you wanted to also ask to the speakers of the different sessions, or that are coming after looking at the answers of this Mentimeter session? or that you may have for the speakers that would like to discuss during the roundtable. Here again is really, you can write, it's an open answer, it's an open question, you can write.
Fanny, maybe we can wait for the answers while we introduce the roundtable, because we are already
Absolutely.
15 minutes behind schedule.
Yes,
So,
yes, and I can stop sharing the screen, and then I will still follow up on the answer. So if you want to answer, yes. Voilà.
Yes, please. So we are a little bit behind schedule, although maybe the wrap up and conclusions could be a little bit shorter. That one is what is stated in the program. So I would like to ask all the participants, presenters of the day, to turn on their cameras in order to have the round table. I know Terence will not be here because it's Thanksgiving in the USA, but all the others, please, if you can turn on your cameras, and especially George Favre, if you could take over the round table and lead the discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think that everyone is able to listen to me and to see my screen. Just to have a short introduction to this roundtable, as you said, we have 6 panelists, so that are the different speakers of the day, except our colleagues from the Graphene Council. And I think that the objective, as yesterday, is to have a lively discussion. So don't hesitate to raise your hand within Zoom, or to ask your question directly within the chat. Fanny is with me, and she will be able to read your question if you don't want to speak. Yes, just to introduce this roundtable today. I want to propose to you to focus the discussion on 3 main topics, actually. And if you have question different to that, no problem at all. But the idea is to gain some knowledge from you regarding 3 main topics, 3 main issues. First one being the needs, the priorities to be identified in terms of developing and standardizing measurement methods and procedures. Second point is dealing with how the different players involved in this process can work together, and how can synergy be found to speed up the process of pre-standardization of testing methods to support, in particular, regulation on advanced material and graphene related 2D materials. And at the end, also to enable the community to know where to turn, to contribute, or to collect information regarding best SOPs to be used. And the question was raised, maybe some minutes ago. And the last point I wanted to discuss today with you is about the dissemination about this best practice, SOPs, standards, to laboratories, industry, service providers, with an important point, from my point of view, with training and laboratory skill assessment, because we are talking a lot about validation of methods, but after that, the laboratories, the testing laboratories needs to implement, use this method, and it is important to maybe to discuss about how these laboratories can be assessed regarding their skills on this point. So just to begin with, maybe if the audience has some question regarding the 3 points, otherwise I can start the roundtable. Is someone in the audience have some question already? And once again, I'm not able to see if there is raise hand. So Fanny, if you see someone. Otherwise, I can start, and yeah, maybe it could be a good occasion to motivate people asking questions. I don't know who is the best panelist to answer this, but we saw this morning during the different presentations that have been given that behind graphene there are a lot of realities, a lot of substances. There are a lot of properties to be characterized, and even if it is a global effort at international scale to support the development and harmonization of characterization and testing methods, we need to do some choices regarding specific sample to be considered, specific properties. So maybe to ask Jörg or Dusan or Charles, what is your opinion about that? What are the main properties or the main graphene related to the materials to be considered and on which effort needs to be focused? I don't know if someone wants to bring some input on that. We already get some information within the Mentimeter session regarding the attributes that are to be prioritized. Sorry, and it appeared that functionalization, impurities, and number of layers maybe were the most critical parameters to be assessed.
George, shall I?
Is it something that it is coherent for you, Charles?
Shall I make a start, George? Yeah, it was quite interesting that Mentimeter, because
Charles, are you still here?
Oh, can you not hear me?
I don't know if your microphone is
Charles,
unmuted.
I can hear you. It's fine for me.
You can hear me. Good.
I can hear you. Maybe Charles has on the
Can everyone else hear me?
I can hear you too.
I can hear you too.
Okay, it's just George who has lost.
Oh dear.
But perhaps I carry on. He doesn't look like. Can you hear me now, George?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
It's okay.
No, I was going to say it's quite interesting, the Mentimeter results, because a lot of those topics are actually being developed already in terms of standards. So things like number of layers, particle shape, lateral particle dimensions, and coming out of that aspect ratio and things like that, those are forming the basis of two standards, the 21356-1 on structural characterization of graphene, and also the one on graphene oxide. Then there's the chemical aspects, the elemental composition, oxygen content, impurities, functionalization. Those two are being covered by 23359, that the chemical standard that Dusan and I have been talking about. But I think maybe Dusan's point that we have techniques in those standards that are more time consuming to be used, maybe, shall I say, the more SEMs, the more AFMs, the XPS and things like that, that are more a sort of one-off, and not day-to-day type instrumentation. So maybe future work needs to be undertaken in more quality control, QA, QC type approaches. I don't know, the more sort of inline techniques.
Thank you, Charles. Maybe just to react on your answer on that point. I saw on the chat that Sean maybe write something regarding there is a need to distinguish the standards related to quality control from the one expected to support safety and regulations. I don't know, maybe Eric, as you presented the status and challenges regarding graphene regulation this morning, maybe do you have any information regarding working group maybe already in place, or if it's not the case, to be created to discuss with regulatory agencies on the needs regarding fiscal parameters to be prioritized to support regulation? Because I agree with what Sean wrote on the chat. Quality control is completely different from safety and regulation, and the standard will not be the same. So is there a place where this point is already discussed, maybe?
Well, it was briefly mentioned this morning on the graphene flagship presentation that there was some interaction with ECA and the graphene flagship, but I'm not sure about an official, very official, where also the member states or commission or those, and I'm not, I don't know of a specific graphene oriented group within OECD, for instance. Clearly, there's discussions on graphene in OECD, but not as much on specifically on graphene. It's more into discussions on advanced materials, as far as I know. Regarding what is needed, clearly the interaction between the different groups is needed, but that's more to clarify each other's needs, I would say. And looking at the Menti questions, and from a safety aspect, it's needed to know what are the impurities and such. But do we really need a specific method for that for safety? It's probably the chemical identification methods that we have. So what is the chemical composition? I think that's sufficient for that aspect, at least from a safety point of view in many cases. And I think what we would need is more on the dispersion stability and knowing what the material is in the test systems and in the tissues or organisms. At what point can we actually pinpoint them down, and how well can we distinguish that from any background that we have? I think that's the main challenges from a safety or hazard assessment point of view, I would say.
Thank you. Any additional comment from someone within the panel or in the audience?
One short comment from my side. I agree absolutely that it's necessary to really separate is a hard word, but really to make some differences between quality control, which is really important for the business, for the companies, and regulation is also important for the companies and so on. But this is all, it must be really distinguished between these two parts. And I think, and this was one for me, one go home message I want to say, that it's really the graphene flagship should be a place where we can discuss these points with the different players. I think we are now in the phase of finding us, I must say, because we have this new structure there. But I think this is really an important point to bring it together. And on the other side, say clearly, these are the needs for quality controls, and these are the needs, these are the methods for physical, chemical, or for the regulation. And the other aspect, I agree absolutely with you, George. It's very important that we learn something more about the, I want to say, interaction between the graphene or the physical or the material and the cells. And this is, due to my knowledge, there are some works, but there are a lot of gaps in this field. And this must be identified.
Elizabeth, you raise your hand. Please.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few things to add on that discussion. So yes, I think we need to look at how we can prepare dispersions because we need them for testing and so on. I think another critical issue is, and I'm not an expert there, and I don't know what is the knowledge in that field, but the question is, what could possibly trigger, what could be a hazard trigger from graphene-related materials? So what are the properties that we need to look at, thinking in the direction of safe by design that is currently discussed? So how can I design my material that it doesn't put a risk? So graphene-related materials have a specific morphology. We know that morphology is an important parameter, taking out the examples of particles or fibers where we know that morphology plays a role. And I think that needs to be, we need to have a second look. We need to know what is the important properties, and then we can also do safe by design, and that should happen in parallel with developments. That's the whole idea of safe by design. So I think we need to come closer together, and there needs to be, well, more work together from both communities to be, yeah, to improve that work, and to first get an understanding and then to know what we need to standardize.
And maybe just to react on that and to know more regarding the next step of the graphene flagship. You mentioned this morning that there are a lot of projects that are some kind of follow-up of graphene flagship, and with a CSA to organize event and work on with regulators, standardization, etc. What kind of work has been done so far within the graphene flagship to detect and characterize graphene related to the materials within complex media to support risk assessment and also regulatory requirements? Is there something to share on what has been done and what are maybe the ongoing discussion that you may have with key players in this field?
First question, I must say I'm new in this flagship now. I'm a new player, but I know that there was this ECHA, this was this working group on with ECHA together. There was some contact, but this was not one or this was not the main issue of the graphene flagship. I must be say clearly. Now to the new phase. Also we are now the graphene. Also the new phase began at 3rd of October. I must say. At the moment, I'm not in Berlin. I'm in Gothenburg because here was a kick-off meeting, and we are at the begin of this work and of this CSA, and we must discuss it. And I think really that it's now the time to make it to find a way to implement regulation and so on, because we must convince the problem is not now that we don't have this, I want to say, top-down approach like before, that we have some that we have some management board, and now they said you must do it like this. This is now in its new structure. It's more a bottom approach, because we must discuss with the project and we must convince them. This is a little bit the problem. And this is one of my tasks, really, to convince them to say standardization is important for you, but also regulation is important for you. And this was one of the thing I write really in the proposal of the CSA, that regulation is now important. This is really now written in the proposal, and this is really the thing I must do, and that we establish something like working group there, and together with you, with the sides from the regulators and so on, to discuss the important points there, because there's one easy reason for companies, also for every company. If there is really a problem that makes graphene unattractive and that makes the product, that there is some health and environmental issues with their product, then they can forget it. And I think this must be clarified, that this is really an important point, because this, if there is a discussion is a public discussion that they say, oh, graphene you don't know, or graphene oxide and so on, you don't know what happens, these are really dangerous and so on, then forgot all these efforts, because then we have or all the companies, all the projects have really a problem. And there is one Safe by Design project in this field. There are also some other calls next year, I think, or next year. And I think it's important. And if you are thinking about this macrame and nanos, also this call here, the last call, you see that also for the nano safety community, it's very important. Also, graphene or 2D materials are a very important issue now, if you see the result of the last calls in this field. And I think this is really now the possibility to work together.
Any comment, reaction from the audience, or panelists maybe want to add something on that? I don't see any raised hand. See, yes, Stefan, please, the floor is yours.
Oh yeah, sorry, just wanted to add to George's comment. So yeah, we're a graphene manufacturer. We are REACH registered for graphene, and we were part of the graphene flagship, but no longer. We're not part of one of the future projects. Yeah, so initially we engaged because we wanted to make sure we have enough data for REACH registration required by ECHA. So that's why we set up this working group with the graphene flagship to see what data could be read across or used for REACH registration. But I think, unfortunately, although there was a lot of data carried out in the last 10 years, a lot of it wasn't performed using good laboratory practice or against OECD guidelines, and so a lot of the data was actually not helpful for us. So that's why we engaged and to kind of make sure that going forwards, all of the any sort of tests and trials on toxicology could be done following the right protocols. But yeah, unfortunately, as a consortium, and we are one of 10 companies that are REACH registered, we've obviously had to share the costs to pay for new tests to be done on our materials. So I think a comment earlier was, the graphene market and 2D materials is dominated by SMEs, and we don't have the funding to do some of the long-term toxicology studies. So any support there, and that can be shared with some of these other larger funded projects would be very useful.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a question to Elisabeth regarding this. Is there any possibility to use OECD WPMN to identify where are the needs regarding physical properties or endpoints to be prioritized in terms of development? Because I think OECD is the right place for that, and it could be useful to use the WPMN to initiate something, because otherwise, work will be dispersed, and it will be it will take a long time to have some priority to be identified.
So I guess WPMN is having a look at graphene. So there is within WPMN, there is a group looking at advanced materials, and graphene was one of the materials identified there to be having a second look at, put like this. And there will be, as also Mar said yesterday, it will be a case study on graphene. It will mainly involve a workshop to get some input and get some discussion started. But I think it's just starting on the issue. So yeah, we're just starting. I think there's not too much experience within WPMN yet on graphene, on that specific issue. And I think most of the work until now was done on the easy nanomaterials like silicon dioxide and so on. So I think it's just like slowly moving in that direction. That's how I would place it. And I think WPMN could probably also profit from having more input from graphene experts. So I think Eric wants to add on that one.
Just before
Very much
giving,
welcome.
yeah, just before giving the floor to Eric, maybe to reformulate what I want to say. Actually, if graphene topic something of high importance for OECD, taken into account that I'm aware that recently, over the last 3 years, advanced materials have been considered, but we saw today that behind graphene we have a lot of realities, and that means that maybe it will be necessary to have big efforts on graphene. If it is a priority, I don't know. Otherwise, maybe the risk is to have something to be developed at OECD level, but on a limited case, I would say, because you will develop something from a specific graphene sample that will not be applicable or useful or relevant for graphene as a whole family of materials.
No, I guess that is where the graphene experts becoming useful, to having that kind of view. And I think before anything is adapted by OECD, you always have your commenting rounds, you have multiple experts into it. So it's not done by a single person, and then we just adapt something that is not useful. So I guess the OECD has a good process to make sure of that. But of course, you still need the experts to be consulted and to be in the process somehow to make sure it works.
Eric, please.
Yeah, thanks. And well, while agreeing with what Elizabeth said and what you try to convey as well, George, it's clear that the way we talk about these things should have clarity. If we talk about graphene, are we really only talking about graphene, or are we talking about the whole range of graphene related to the materials? Be specific what you mean if you're talking about things. I think that's the first point I would like to add here. On advanced materials in and graphene in OECD, yes, we are in OECD exploring it, but really on a very initial step, like also trying to identify what is really missing for these type of materials. What do we really need here? And as such, prioritize whether test guidelines need to be adapted, those that are existing, or that we need something new. And if we need something new, what is it that we need? That is kind of the discussions that are now ongoing. And clearly, any test guideline, especially for hazards that OECD will develop or adapt, they aim to be as broadly applicable as possible in principle, but that's the principle. I know it doesn't work like that totally, but in principle, they should be applicable to all individual chemicals. That's not how it works in practice. I totally see that, but that's the starting point. So they aim for test guidelines that are applicable to a broad group. So hopefully for the whole range of graphene related to the materials, but then still focusing on what is needed for that. And clearly what type of characterization is needed to make the distinction between the different materials and make sense out of the different outcomes of a hazard test is one of the topics there. And then I totally agree with Elizabeth. We need the graphene experts there, because it's to really dig into the details of what is needed and how best to kind of group the different materials in useful units to be able to develop test guidelines or adapt test guidelines for the specific options, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Rick. I saw that 3 persons have raised their hand. So first, Jörg, and second, Dusan. Please, Jörg.
Okay, there was one comment in the chat I see from Barry, also that there is some initiative about I think a literature survey of which was initiated by the Accord project for the OECD advanced materials, and so I'm also involved in this. Also, there is something. There is some work ongoing. Also, we must always say we are at the beginning. We are not at the end of the process. We are really at the beginning of the process, and we must really identify now what is important, what is not important. Also, must be clarified. We don't have the solution. We don't have the answers at the moment. We are really at the beginning. This is an important point, I think, in this field. And another short comment is, speaking about graphene always and so on, but we must always have in mind that, especially from some industry, they are also speaking a lot about this other 2D materials or very thin films or something like this. Must always broaden our view. It's not only graphene, it's not only these carbon products. These are a lot of other materials which are interesting. And we must really see what we can learn from the nanomaterials. I think we have there again a lot of things we can learn from it, transfer this knowledge to graphene, and then really try to transfer this also to all these other 2D materials. And it's clear that these 2D materials play a very important role in this all advanced materials, that they are very important for all these classes of advanced materials. However you define advanced materials, this is another question, but I think this is clear.
Dusan, please.
I think we need to look on whole graphene industry here. So we have graphene manufacturer and graphene user that using graphene for product development. As I can see now, biggest problem is in quality of graphene materials. We have so many graphene producers, we don't know what they're making. Is it graphene or not graphene? So is missing point aspect now that should be defined. I think for every graphene producer, we should make a list of parameters what they should provide in their technical data sheets. That will define somehow quality standard that end user can rely on that, because they don't know. Currently we have in product specification just one Raman graph, or they say 98% of carbon. That's nothing to say. I think forcing graphene manufacturer to provide list of maybe 10 or whatever parameters to define their product, that will be very important starting point, and that will help also manufacturer to know what they need to do, because now they don't know, and will help end user to recognize which product they're looking regarding property and their application. When we have these parameters, then we can work which method is most appropriate for that. I think that's missing now.
Yes, I agree with that, but I think that in an ideal world, we can have time to define all of this, and then think about regulation risk later on. But I think that a regulator, has some pressure today to ask some information regarding such kind of advanced materials, and then we'll ask industry to provide such a kind of information without having the necessary test guideline to produce this information. So I think that I fully agree with you. We need to build the basis, and the basis are exactly what you said. But we also need to initiate some work to provide to industry, to regulators, the tools to produce data requested by regulation. And I think that Elisabeth mentioned that OECD WPMN need graphene experts to share key message information regarding where are the priorities regarding fiscal parameters, methods to be considered. And I think that maybe the new project at European level, and maybe in Australia, you also have initiative to connect with regulatory world are really key. So I don't know if in Australia you already are connected with regulatory agencies to share your knowledge, and in particular your approach using not necessary high-tech methods, but affordable testing methods to produce data, because it is really key also to regulation. So do you have any ongoing discussion with Australian agencies on that?
I know a company I work, they completed this similar kind national reach regarding material, and they ask some data regarding environmental impact. So they ask us to provide, and we provide some regarding soil and so on. But regarding toxicity, there is not any data, so we could provide. So this is still early stage. I think Australia looking what's happening in Europe, what they will do, and they will follow that, I guess.
Okay. Charles, sorry, you raise your hand, please.
Thank you, George. Just two comments, really. One on repetition and one on cost. Regarding repetition, I think that we need to note that there are a number of standards bodies, regulatory bodies out there, and what we need to be careful of is that we don't repeat the wheel and just do the same thing in different standards bodies. So we have a very nice body of test guidelines, methods for phys-chem testing of graphene related 2D materials now in ISO TC 229 and going into CEN as well. What we don't need is for OECD or other bodies to then use funding, which is of course limited, to repeat that and to do the same thing. Rather, we need them to take those graphene standards, those ISO standards, and simply apply them to regulations. My other point is cost. Steve Hodge could make this much better than me. But just to say that, of course, in the GR2M industry, a lot of the suppliers, the companies are SMEs, and there is a high cost there to testing. So if we want a graphene industry in Europe. We just need to be careful that we don't stop it immediately with a very, very high cost and barrier to commercialization and adoption.
Thank you, Charles. Message well noted. It is important. Eric.
Yeah, I totally agree with this message, Charles. It's clearly important, but it has the two angles. Well, first of all, I don't think OECD will repeat what ISO is doing. There are quite good contacts, so I don't expect that they will do that again. But what would be good to have the Graphene Council framework looks at 19 parameters to really identify the materials and that industry among themselves know what they're talking about if they have specific material. That's a starting point, but maybe a subset of those is most essential for a hazard assessment. So having a clearer view of what is the most essential ones that we need for a hazard assessment might reduce the costs there a bit. Not saying that it will be an easy task to identify that, but that might be a way forward. Clearly, collaborations between different industry partners, different SMEs, to provide data together on hazards. I totally see that hazard assessment, hazard testing can be costly, especially if it's more the chronic testing of things. But I think we need to find a balance between getting a grip on how hazardous or non-hazardous a material is with a minimum of information. And I think the only way we can get there, or at least agree on that minimum set, is by making sure that the regulators and the industry and all other experts that we need on that discuss among each other and clarify each of their needs, and not only talking about the money itself, but also talking about, I mean, what was said already, if there's doubts about the safety of the graphene material by the consumers, then you will never get a market for your graphene material. So I think that is also something to take into account. And I totally see the struggles of SMEs, but I think the only way forward is talk to each other and make sure that we have these interactions like today, but also in other green fora.
Jörg and Elizabeth, I saw that you raised your hand, but if you don't mind, I will give the floor to Guillaume because he didn't, he hasn't yet the opportunity to speak. So please, Guillaume. Your mic is on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Just to push back on what Eric just said around different routes to define, I would say, the toxicity and the way of defining the hazard of graphene. I would say I'm not a graphene expert, and I'm not really, or even more, I would say, a regulation expert. I just deal with colloidal chemistry, but what I think it's a three-stage problem. The first one is highly dependent. It will be for me highly dependent of the type of graphene you are looking for. I would say the reduced graphene and oxide, and for example, graphene oxide will not have the same reactivity in different medium. And after, it's also the way to prepare sample. And I would say the first stage will impact the second one. If we are not able to clearly define which is the best way for a defined type of graphene to prepare in the best condition the sample, it will impact, in fact, the toxicity assessment you will make after. for example, if we cannot maintain the same size of the particles of the graphene materials we are looking for, we will maybe overestimate or underestimate the toxicity of such materials. So I would say will be highly dependent of the type of graphene we are looking for, the grade, and also the grade and the type will influence the preparation of the sample for toxicity issue afterwards. Okay. Yeah, just to comment on what Eric was saying.
Jörg, if you want to add something.
Yes, I want to. Another problem. We always speaking about these SMEs and so on as producers. We have another problem in the graphene community. We have always this very nice long list of applications, and it's a difference if I use graphene or some graphene related to D material as a biosensor or in a biosensor or in a concrete or something like this. And this is also an important point. Must think about this really. And I think also in terms of regulation, it makes a difference. It's really a great problem in our field. We are always speaking about this graphene related to D materials and so on, but we have this long list of applications. And of course, this different application has some influence on all the hazards of graphene and so on, or it could be any difference. And I think this is also something which should be mentioned in the process of where we are now.
Elisabeth, I don't know if your comment is linked to what Jörg said, but please.
I think I didn't fully get the point of Jörg. I'm sorry. My hand before was more on the comment of Charles Clifford saying like, yeah, we don't need to copy an OECD what has been done in ISO, but we need to look at if the TOX tests, if the test guidelines that are up are applicable for graphene, what we need to do to make them applicable for graphene, and also probably to define at a certain level what are the relevant parameters we need to look, we need to test, and to have some of that probably also established at OECD apart from ISO, because OECD is the one body that is mostly referred to by regulation, and that has some reasoning behind why that is the case. I don't know, Jörg, I didn't really got the issue you put up. Maybe you can try once more. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if Jörg wants to react. Otherwise, I have two questions. But
no,
please.
Josh, continue.
Yeah, just to ask a question to Dusan, because I noted that you mentioned the material library you develop within your laboratory or your university in Adelaide. I think that this point is really key to have some kind of reference materials, not necessarily fully characterized or certified, but reference testing materials to help developing test guidelines, SOPs, etc. Is this material library maybe usable or accessible for such kind of development?
I got this library by collecting samples from producers from maybe 20 different producers that include pristine graphene, reduced graphene oxide. They give to me with condition that I cannot disclose that is their materials. So I'm just using, we analyze all this material with all 20 different methods using ICO and NPL procedure and our method. So we know all these properties. So from that, my experience, what is on the market now, it doesn't look very close to what is in ICO written about standards of materials. The quality are so far below regarding this, number of layers and many other things. What we're doing now, we try to use artificial intelligence software to try to get some data, and I'm looking now to get grant for that. And after that, it will be really great to make this publicly open and extend this library maybe to 100 different materials. I think this is a too large project for me. I think that should be done by larger, in link with more group and more countries.
Yeah, but interesting to know that you have such kind of material library anyway. Some comment from the audience, because the panelists talk a lot. If someone has a question or a comment. Otherwise, I have one more. And maybe Jörg is a good person to answer to that. But I think that regarding what the comment within the chat, other person can react. The graphene flagship ended recently, so we already talked about that. But the graphene flagship had a graphene flagship standardization committee, which hosted all the discussion regarding standardization for graphene at European level. So what is the future regarding standardization activities at European level? Because we mentioned, and I think that it was you, Jörg, that Europe has a lot of things to do to face ASEAN company competitivity or competition, sorry. And I think that standardization is a good tool for that, but we need to have some action at EU level, maybe. So is it something ongoing to have a follow-up of the graphene flagship standardization committee, maybe within the CEN/TC 352?
Yes, clear answer, yes. Because it's now as each project or each funded project must be nominated or nominated one responsible person for standardization. We are now discussing about the title of this person, and there will be a continuation of this standardization committee. It will be at the next. There will be a kick-off meeting between the TSA and all the project at 5 and 6 of February, which is now, it's clear now. And there will be also, I want to say, a kick-off meeting of the new standardization committee. And we are also open for other persons. Also, this is also one thing. We are also open. The idea is also to write to other persons where we know that they are active in the standardization activities of graphene. There will be a continuation. This is clear.
But if I well understood what you said, the current option is not to host those activities within the technical committee 352 in charge of nanotechnology within CEN.
I think at the moment not, but we can discuss about this. We must discuss about this. Also, as I said, the kick-off meeting is at 5th or 6th of February. This is, and there will be a meeting about this, about the other thing, about the. There will be about a meeting about with all the projects which are now funded, and this was clear. This is in the, I want to say something in the contract or in the. They must really nominate one standardization, one responsible person for standardization, and then we discuss what are the contact to CAN, also to nanotechnology and ISO and so on. This is then under discussion.
Okay, thank you. Because I don't know if Kirsten Rasmussen is among the participants this afternoon, because she is the chair of the Scientific 352 strategy group, and during the last strategy group meeting at Scientific 352 level, the idea of hosting graphene activity was discussed. So I think this discussion is relevant in the future.
I think good idea. I will contact Kerstin and so on, so we can discuss about this.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but Blanca was asking, Jörg, which projects are you referring to when you say they need to have someone responsible for standardization? And I was actually wondering the same. That's why I just thought.
These are all projects which are. These are all projects which are now funded under the umbrella of the graphene flagship CSA. In this call, these are this 12 project which I mentioned. This is if they don't, they have mentioned or they have nominated one responsible person for the standardization, or they must nominated one person until the 5th of October, 5th of February. These are the projects. Under this umbrella, I think we must also discuss about the other projects which are founded, which are related to graphene, and this is also one thing, but this is at the moment the situation.
Thank you. Another comment. I saw that Steffi raised her hand. So Steffi, I don't know if it's still the case.
I was about to ask. Hi, Jörg. I was about to ask the question if other projects that are working on graphene could also be considered to be included. And then Jörg said exactly that. So forget about my question. Okay. And I can see that Kirsten has switched on your microphone and camera now. So you're much more on the spot, Kirsten, than I am.
Yeah, I put myself on the spot, and sorry for just jumping in. I mean, we welcome proposals for standardization, and I would suggest that we continue to discuss how to take this forward within SEN 352. It's really important, and you can help us to understand the European problems that you want to resolve, and we can try to get the standardization processes across to you. I mean, of course, there's work involved when you want to standardize. And thank you very much also for being willing to promote the standardization. So and I think that was it from my side. So I will off-spot myself now.
Any comment? We still have 10 minutes for this roundtable before moving to the wrap-up session with Steffi. Any comment from the audience? Yes, Eric, please. You're not in the audience, but please.
If there's someone in the audience, they can, of course, also raise their hand. Mel, I was coming back briefly to a comment by Jörg before on that we should also look at how the different graphene forms are used, which applications they are used, and that might also require different approaches towards how we tackle the different issues. And my clear question is then, are you also referring to the safe and sustainable chemistry framework? Sorry, I'm using the wrong term here. That safe and sustainable by design framework that was recently published. Is that also something that you have in mind in your flagship as well, or?
Clear question, clear answer, yes. Yeah.
And any ideas on how you will tackle that bit, or is it still very complex?
It's still very complex. It's still very complex. I must always say, and this is also a problem of this CSA, we coordinate and support. We don't make the things, we coordinate and support. What we can make is really to promote it, to say it, to convince people from these points. This is at the moment our task to make to say this is an important point, think about this and so on. And we are also discussing now about this is another point. There is from the European Commission, there is some input from the graphene flagship CSA expected for further calls and so on. And we are thinking about then further calls if you are thinking about projects, for example.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe just to move to another topic, or quite similar, I would say, actually. Question to Guillaume. Different speakers mentioned today that dosimetry was really important to support toxicological assessment of nanomaterials in a general point of view, but for graphene related to the materials. You presented the static multi-light scattering technique as a promising tool to assess dispersibility of an object in colloidal suspension before or prior toxicological assessment. Do you have any action regarding the use of this technique for graphene related to the materials to support toxicity testing? And if yes, do you have a plan? Do you have in your mind to maybe to push this technique into standardization, or maybe within OECD level to propose a testing method, because it could be maybe relevant?
To answer to you first, I would say first questions around the adaptability of the method to graphene materials. We can imagine to make, for example, the same of what I have presented for titanium dioxide, which is in fact a great interest for people who work in the cosmetic area, because there are a lot of titanium dioxide in some such cosmetic products, and we need to know the toxicological effect of such a material. So we can imagine to make the same procedure we made for titanium dioxide with graphene materials, and also different type of graphene materials. This is the first aspect. Second aspect, we do some work on graphene materials, especially in collaboration with Carbon Waters. We make some work with them on their graphene dispersions, more here to assess the surface chemistry of their products. So based on analytical method and predictive semi-empirical tool, such as the Hansen parameter, which allow to have an information of the chemistry and the weak forces you have on the surface, which can greatly influence I would say the impact on the cells. For example, the notion of hydrophobicity, which are more relevant, for example, for graphene oxide only few layer graphene. And finally, for pushing, I would say, these techniques on the European level and on the OCDE, this is an interest for us because we think that the technique can provide the relevant information, and especially for concentrating samples and medium which is difficult to measure, something like the size and so on, especially for example for cell culture mediums, which is sometimes quite difficult to measure size and even more difficult to measure parameters such as zeta potentials. We think that our technology can provide some information to, I would say, to fill the gap, to fill the hole in such complex medium, and it will be really interesting for us to be I would say, be part of this standardizations and be part of the different characterization method that can be required and used to characterize this type of material.
Okay, so maybe some collaboration to be imagined in the future to support you. Okay, 3 minutes before the end of the roundtable, if you want to be on time and on schedule. Any last reaction, comment? Or maybe I can use a question of or something mentioned during the Mentimeter session earlier. Someone wrote that it could be useful to have a collaboration between USA and Europe on this question. So we saw that, and people familiar with graphene related to the material know very well the Graphene Council, and US are very active on this field. Is there any ongoing collaboration between EU and US on the topic of graphene related to the materials, and characterization of such kind of materials, for sure, or is it something to build? I don't know if someone has an answer on that. Maybe Jörg, because as an expert of characterization and someone from the graphene flagship, you have maybe some information and input to this, because I guess it is an important point.
Yes, it's an important point. I'm not sure about this. I must say I don't know it now exactly. I think there are some collaboration, but I cannot give now the answer, the correct answer to say there are. Okay, also it's for me it's a little bit. I don't know it exactly.
Okay, sorry in this case.
George, the only ones I know are the unfunded type, like participating in documentary standards, interlaboratory testing, those sorts of things. It would be great to have more collaboration. I don't know how the funding mechanisms work that way. Because
on the topic of nanomaterial, there is a EU-US community of research, and maybe, I'm not the best one to talk about that, but maybe Steffi, if you have any comment on that. I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, so that is actually the right key word for me here, the right cue. We were together with some other people who are working in the CORs, in the communities of research on nano EHS. That is basically the topic that they are looking at. We were in the US at the Communities of Research meeting last week. And the reason why that still carries nano very much in a focus and is, it was built on the nano community. It was very much built on the nano environment, health and safety topic. And we were a few European representatives in the room, but largely connected to data and digitalization of our processes now, for the simple reason that the communities of research on data between the US and the EU is currently one of the most active ones. So we were there with 9:07 and with a representative from Maastricht University, and then both of those are data experts. We had exactly the same conclusion. We needed a lot more groundwork in protocols, in SOPs, in a lot of the work that needed to be done. The US is a lot less regulatory driven in their research community, so standards actually do play a much, much larger role. And we did have a number of people from NIST in the room, and lo and behold, it shows that we are on the right track here. We were discussing very similar topics to the ones that we heard today. So there is an appetite to be working on that one, but the one thing that we need to appreciate and just notice it, but not try to actually make it a defining factor, is that the US will still continue to operate this out of their ring-fenced nanotechnology funding. That is the National Nanotechnology Initiative running the NNCO. So there is still a lot of the nano word in there, but I would just like to say, let's just take it as that, and let's just take it as a name of a community that is established and that knows what it is doing, and not put us off to now broaden the work into graphene, into advanced materials, because this is very much how we are now working with them and engaging with them. So there's a lot of appetite there, and maybe on that level we can do a little bit.
Okay, thank you. I think we are done. It's already 3 p.m. European time, and I think it is quite late in Australia. So I don't know if someone has a last comment or question. Otherwise, I propose to bring this roundtable to a close in order to keep to the timetable. So any last question, comment from the panelists, from the audience? No. So in this case, I would like to thank you. Thank you all the speakers for today. Thank you for your participation to this roundtable. And I think, Steffi, that it's your turn for the wrap-up session.
Is this my cue? Okay.
Yeah.
It leaves me to say another round of thank you, and that is thank you to and you wouldn't get anything from me without not also showing your presentation. So it essentially leaves me to say thank you to the fabulous organizers of this event, and it wouldn't have been what it has been, and we have received offline and online a lot of compliments already, and I think the turnout of well over 100 people yesterday and going close to 100 today showed very much that there is an interest there. We brought the communities together. We actually brought many different disciplines together. And all of that was only possible through the tireless work of our colleagues at Bauer, who were essentially continuing, as you saw in the announcement of this meeting, the tradition established during the Nano Harmony meeting, very much helped by the colleagues from the NIA, the Nano Industries Association. So special thanks to Sean there and his colleagues, and the other two projects that were brought in through the NIA, and that is iCare and NanoPass. And we have very much taken this forward from this fabulous color scheme macrame project. So you're going to get to enjoy the color scheme one more time as I show you a few wrap-up slides just to highlight a few things that were discussed. There was actually a lot of order in what we said was essentially a very complex and very busy field. We did call it Harmonization and Standardization Workshop for the simple reason we started with harmonization yesterday, and we spoke a lot more about standardization today. the harmonization theme was only interrupted a little bit for the alert listener and conference workshop attendee here, in that Georges Favre and Elisabeth Heunisch swapped their slots. Elisabeth spoke about the multi-initiative and the nanoharmony initiative a little bit more today, whereas the stint for George yesterday was to speak about VAMAS, ISO, and CEN. But other than that, we very much had a focus on harmonization yesterday. We had a lot of policymakers, policy informing organizations on board. We spoke about everything from the review and development of OECD test guidelines and guidance documents to the validation of the methodologies behind it, and specifically the relation of in vivo, in vitro, and we then spoke about NAMs. We had an insight taken with what was discussed today as well. We had an insight into this, into how this test guidance guideline document review and development actually works, all the way through the harmonization that needs to be done, the validation. And we spoke about the acceptance that is necessary to actually be attractive and to the people who are then fulfilling these dossiers and methodologies and using them, and the use of them. And that was very much given in the Malta initiative, as we heard today, and the NanoHarmony project and all of its legacy that continues well into the next year and beyond. And very much driving the discussion yesterday were our partner projects iCare and Nanopass, to the left and to the right of Macrame here. And then we had a very, very good discussion led by our colleagues from the NIA and also partners in Macrame, the roundtable on NAMs. And we did even get to the point where we needed to talk about what does the acronym actually mean, because some of us know it under non-animal methods, others know it under new approach methodologies, and it continues to cause a little bit of confusion there. But in essence, we were speaking about the same things. The only thing that is to be discussed is if in the new approach methodologies, any animal testing can actually play a role. But what we very much spoke about, and in discussion with the policymakers and the policy informing organizations on board, and also those who in the end decide if these new methods are going to be accepted into any safety and regulatory relevant dossiers, we spoke about what is to be included. And one of the quotes here I got was, we need a whole range of mechanistic methods. So this is not about limiting, but it is about increasing the diversity. And we spoke about how NAMs are going to be further developed. And there is a take where we probably need everybody in there, and we need a mix of policy incentives. Look at the cosmetics directive as to developing those and kickstarting more development of non-animal methods / new approach methodologies that are a lot more digitalized as well, and the right mix of contributors. There is a discussion if industry should be contributing more specific financials or not, and there is a very, very different number of takes in the community, and that is not resolved, and it is better not to resolve that because it is probably a case-by-case approach here. And then we spoke about how the NAMs are going to be applied, and the one quote I wrote down is the one that Tommaso gave from Maurice Wieland, I believe. It seems that more NAMs we develop, the fewer NAMs we actually use. We had a very good discussion on that yesterday, and all of that is to be continued. This is very much a snapshot of the discussion that we're having at the moment. And then today we went much more into the forgot to take a line out there. I copied the slide and forgot to take the top line out there. We spoke about standardization, of course. We spoke about VAMAS, CEN, and ISO, kindly introduced by George yesterday in his presentation. A lot of that is currently and in the past focused on nano, simply because the committees at CEN and ISO level are nanotechnology committees. And now, and we heard that very much from Jörg and from other colleagues that cut their teeth in the graphene flagship, graphene has now more and more become partners in the nanotechnology committees at CEN and ISO level, much more ISO than CEN, and is working actually on that level. So the nanotechnologies are now broadening out to include graphene as well, and that is very much the way that where we are going. So we heard about the background of graphene, its research and innovation initiatives, and the outcome of that, and the impacts that is left in so many organizations. 35,000, I think, was the quote. They're being interested in graphene, and we have a number of spillovers and spin-outs already. And all of that came out of the 10-year initiative that was the Graphene Flagship. And a lot of what we spoke about in the last couple of hours was all about, so where is it, where are we going with graphene now? And it turns out that graphene finds itself maybe for want of a slightly more nuanced description, but very much at the level where nanomaterials were a while ago, on the level of we have great innovation, we have great products, but we need to make sure that we are allowed to bring them to the market now. So there are ongoing standardization needs, and they are as trivial, in inverted commas, as dosimetries and dispersion protocols, in order to then look at if test guidelines need to be changed and how test guidelines need to be adopted in order to then do the reliable and reproducible safety testing at the OECD level. Safety testing very much for market access, and we heard a lot about, and I think it was part of a comment in the, sorry, I keep pointing at something that you can't see, I have another screen open here, something that was discussed in the chat, and that was the how much is the graphene flagship and the graphene innovations for all of the fabulous impacts that they are promising, how much is that already involved with ECHA and OECD testing? And I think it's very much starting to look that way in order to secure market access for itself. And obviously, as the nanotech community, not only are we very much engaged as the nanomaterials and nanomaterial safety community, very much engaged in a lot of the graphene work. But we are also here in order to help, because exactly these hurdles were the ones that we have a few years ahead of what graphene is facing now regarding, are the test methods applicable? Do they need to be changed? Who do we need to talk to? What needs to be established in order to secure the market for all of these fabulous graphene innovations? And then the last round that we had, obviously also looking over the European plate and working with other communities on that one as well. And I'm very grateful to Jörg for mentioning the Accords project, another one of our sister projects, not one that has been with us in organizing this joint meeting today from the start, but very much one that has definitely pulled its weight here today and deserves mention, because they are looking at the graphene materials as well. So that leaves me to show you a slide that we've actually shown in other occasions before. Jörg has definitely seen it at other occasions when we were speaking about the different standards and harmonized test guidelines and guidance documents we have developed. As the nanomaterials, in brackets, safety community, we have developed a number of things on ISO, CEN, and OECD level, but we are looking forward to now including graphene and many more materials, because there is a lot more to be done, because there are a lot of gaps that we have identified. We have some of those already, and you can check them all in the slideshow that will be made available this evening to you. So have a look at what you're finding there. And my very last appeal is, this is not over. We have only just confirmed to each other that we are going to work together more. So my suggestion is there is another meeting going on next week at which some of these things, I believe, may be discussed even more and more concretely in the regulatory context. And then we are again, and as I said yesterday, we are currently organizing Materials Week, and that is very much one that is trying to bring all of the communities together in order to be solution-driven and go forward with the best interdisciplinary and best collaborative approach, and bring these small communities together that have really cut their teeth in this so far. That leaves me pretty much on the dot of 15, hey ho, 15:15, saying thank you to everybody.